Welcome to What We Couldn't Say on Sunday, the podcast where we dive deeper into the thoughts, reflections, and messages that couldn't make it into Sunday's sermon. Whether it's a story left untold, a lesson needing more time, or a question left unanswered, this is the space where we can explore the faith journey together in a deeper, more personal way. I'm your host, Seth. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the show, Season 2 of What We Couldn't Say on Sunday. It is a new season, a new year. No matter when you're listening to this, for us, it is just the start of 2025. So what better way to start off this year than beginning to look at a new series? We're in the series called The Path, which is a journey of a lifetime. It is a series on spiritual formation and discipleship and looking to grow deeper. And certainly winter is a time when not just we hunker down inside, but it's also when plants begin to go deeper and sow deeper roots and get ready for the harvest that is to come. So we, as followers of Jesus, are looking at how do we go deeper in our faith with this new series. But we're glad you're here. We're glad for this new series to dive into. My name is Seth. I'm here with Pastor Kyle Reynolds, and we are excited for this series because it's been a long time coming. Kyle, can you kind of give a little bit, I know you gave a little bit of backstory on the series itself, but just when did the idea start? When did the problem begin where you're like, this is solving a problem to some degree in the church for us specifically? Can you give us a little more backstory on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a crisis of every church. There's so many things in the church world that are measurable, and they're good. They're good things. You count attendance because every person in a seat matters. They need something. They need to be pastorally cared for. You count views on YouTube. You count social media. You count giving, all these things. But it really comes down to, you count people getting saved, but nowhere in Scripture does it ask you to make converts or to make people followers of Jesus. It actually asks that you make them disciples of Jesus. And therein lies this problem, because what is a disciple of Jesus? Is it a metricable, countable, quantifiable degree? Well, how can it be if it's a lifetime pursuit? And so, here in our church, it's been a wild season the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of salvation, which again, all amazing things, super grateful. It's God. But we had to answer the question, okay, what does discipleship look like? And how do we create a system, a structure, a path of clarity for these people? If we want them to own their own spiritual development, if we want them to take their faith seriously, if we want them to be more like Jesus, then how do we illuminate a path for them to take the right steps to do so? And that was the crisis. What do we do? And it can't be a book that they read. It can't be a class that they attend. It can't be a program that they get a certificate at the end of, because how do you put someone through a program?
Jesus didn't say, come and join a program.
Yeah.
Follow me.
And that's what we've unfortunately reduced discipleship to, is like a track that someone's on. It's got to be so much more than that. But it's also got to speak to the fact that it's never A to B. It's never a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
It's a jumbled mess, and life happens, stuff hits, death, job change, moving. So how do I give someone enough resource, enough guidance, enough prompting, and enough, information that they could run, and not just run, but run ahead of me, run ahead, that if the Lord chooses to move them, that they don't have to start this journey all over again, that they have to be dependent on their next church to be their only source of sustenance. How can they feed themselves? How can they own their own spiritual development inside of community? Because I think the Bible's pretty clear about community and vulnerability. Like, be honest with where you're at.
And I like the idea. And as we dig into the path here, you mentioned stuff happens, and your journey isn't like anybody else's journey. Everybody's on a different way of engaging with Jesus and your story and all that. Yes. But I think this framework, as we get into it, well, I hope, and for me it is this way, and I hope for some other person it goes, wait, discipleship isn't just a class. It's not just a small group, these kind of things. Yes, like you said, community and accountability are very important parts of discipleship, but it's permission to go, where I'm at is okay right now, because I'm moving closer to Jesus. But like, just the because I'm not, where somebody else is and their spiritual journey, it's like, it's about taking your step. It's about just owning your own discipleship and not just doing it the way that you see somebody else doing it and the place they are with Christ, but going, I'm just moving closer to Christ. And that means something different for each person. And even each person, as they're in a different phase of life, something different for them at that time too.
And that is, all these, you have this problem with growth. You have a problem with all these saved people. Okay, then how do I pastor them? How do I make disciples with them? And then, we did this thing, which again is brilliant. But every time you do a brilliant thing in the church world, you just create a new problem, which I think is funny. And we all think that we want a problem-free church. They don't exist. Actually, they do exist. They're dying churches. But we started doing this thing called 10-minute party because we don't want to be a big church. We want to be a healthy church. And a healthy church, one of the key marks of a healthy church is connected. I don't want people to feel like they can just sneak in the back door and then exit the back door and never known that they were there. That doesn't sound like a family. That just sounds like an entertainment thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we started doing this 10-minute party. And this year, especially in the Northeast Ohio area, well, I'm sure it's true of a lot of areas, there's some churches going through some pivotal decision-making things, especially in regards to where they land on the LGBTQ spectrum. Are they an affirming church? And so in our area, we've had a lot of churches that, made a decision to go one way or other. And in that decision, it disenfranchises a group of people. So 2 particular churches in the area opted to go a more liberal, more open, affirming route. And so we, I guess, by God's grace, I don't know, we started getting a lot of people coming from churches that made this hard choice, and they were disappointed, but they're like, we need to find a new church. And so it's on one hand, you're like, okay, cool. I want to be a part of a growing church, and I would much rather grow from new conversions, right? People experiencing Jesus for the first time. But I will tell you, in our season, it's kind of nice to grow with some seasoned saints,
right.
People
some
who
depth, yeah.
are further along down the road and don't need to be, start from square one, that they know Jesus. And so I was like, yay. But as we started to engage these people in the 10-minute party, what I learned and what I started to realize as I started to talk to them is they weren't ready to serve. They're not ready to, jump in a class. These are people who are disenfranchised. They're grieving. Their hearts are broken because the thing they love, the thing that they bled for, the thing that they served for years is no longer their home. And that was just this eye-opening, is like, man, maybe the best thing for them is actually just to sit right now.
Right.
To become aware of God's presence in their pain, in their new season, and not be mad at him. Not roll up their sleeves and start to serve someone else. No, they needed to sit. And it just came hard because it's like, well, how do you, you could tell someone to sit, but how do you track that? How do you measure that? How do you give permission for that? Because nowhere in the church is sitting. We always talk about, 80% of the people don't do anything. 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And there's always this cry to, you got to serve. You got to do. And we've somehow connected that discipleship is doing. And it's not, it's being. And in the being, there's things you do, there's things you process, there's times you sit, there's times you pray, it's a whole spectrum of things.
Right.
And that was an eye-opening thing. Go, okay, how do I create space? How do we as a church create space for every person, no matter where they're at in their journey, no matter where they're at in their season of life, but give them permission, give them guidance. Again, same thing I said before, give them information to make their own choice. And then here's the other kicker, not have to tell them. Empower them to discern it. That's the big one.
Yeah.
Because if I have to tell everyone where they're at spiritually, I've just become God.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, man, I don't want to be God. I am not God.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. I don't want that control, but I also don't want that responsibility. I don't want them to stand at the end of their days and go, yeah, but my pastor told me this.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't. That's awful. That's too big of a cross to bear, and nor is it a burden any pastor should carry.
Right.
That's not biblical.
But my point earlier, I think it's giving people permission to find themselves in the story again, just like you said, but permission to also say like, my reality was upended for whatever reason, whether it's a church move or a life change of sorts, but your reality changes, and the way that you were engaging with God and with other people in community changes, and you got to find yourself in this story again in a new way, and your identity begins to, like it or not, we all find ourselves in some level of belonging within community. We all have a seat we sit in. Literally, people will go, "This is my seat. You're sitting in my seat." It's so like ingrained in our culture to do the same thing all the time, where sometimes we just need to, we get shaken up, or we need to be shaken up in our way of following Jesus or interacting with faith, and in a way that helps us to go, my identity isn't in my serving. It's not in my regular doing. It's not in my habits. My identity is simply found purely in just following Jesus. And this is attacking that at the heart of what does it mean to follow Jesus. So wrapping up this Sunday, if you were with us, we're again, week 1 of the series, just a brief overview to give you some context. Again, stop the podcast now, listen to the sermon if you haven't, but here's just a basic rundown, 5 different points here. Jesus invited people to follow him. That was the first thing. The problem is most people who claim to follow Jesus aren't really following according to polls and data and all kinds of stuff. What are they really doing? They're not really following Jesus. So this crisis in the church is that people are wanting God to be a part of their story in their way, which is convenient for them, instead of seeing it the other way around, where God really invites us into his story. And our job is to follow his leading by submitting to him and his rule and his authority in our life, and what that means for us, instead of just applying God to the areas that are convenient for us in our life and that make our life better, instead of going, no, I'm going to fully submit my life to him. And that's where being a disciple of Jesus, being immersed in his way, not our own way, really takes shape. So we really contrasted 2 different characters. I'm sure we'll talk about them today. It's this King Uzziah as well as the prophet Isaiah, and their different ways of interacting with God and what that meant for them. And also at the end of it, we really got into this idea that to follow Jesus, we got to bust out a roadmap, which is our Bible, in community, and look deep into God's story to discover our next step. So if you missed the sermon, go back and look through. But that's just kind of an overview to give you an idea of what we covered this Sunday. We covered the first letter in PATH. PATH is an acronym. The 4 steps of the path, or 4 areas of the path, are participating in God's story, aware of his presence. We'll get into that in week 2. Week 3 will be talking about being transformed by his word. And then H is helping God's people, helping the family of God, helping other people as the last step or last area of this path. So Kyle, looking at this first week, is there anything that hit the cutting room floor for you?
I mean, yes. Yeah, this week was intense, tons of information. I would have loved to camp out on just the players, King Uzziah and Isaiah. I just think the timeline is comical. I don't know a better word. It's just funny to me that here's the Lord using a king, and all of a sudden King Uzziah gets too full of himself. He forgets who makes it makes it rain, who's the one who rains down blessing, who's the one who makes countries prosper. Starts thinking it's his own, and he takes his own faith, his own desires in his own hands, and right, there's punishment that comes from that. But then simultaneously there's a prophet who, the same year that the king dies, has a dream, and it ends up being the call of his life. And I mean, we're just coming off of Christmas. How many prophecies about the coming Messiah are directly from Isaiah? I mean, here's a guy who prophetically spoke about the coming Messiah. He not to say what he did, what John did. He didn't pave the road, but he inspired hope that sustained people for 400 years.
Right.
400 years that there is a Messiah coming. There's a king that's coming. Emmanuel is going to come. And it's crazy to me when I go, how much when we die, how much will we see a tapestry of what our decisions or our lack of decision or our poor decisions, how it changed everything, or what
Wow,
we
yeah.
could have been a part of. And so I don't know, it's just interesting to me to see this king who was succeeding and then decided to take his own story into his own hands, and then a guy who scared to death, and watch what God did with him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, with King Uzziah, I mean, the story's crazy. You know, how do you get so full of yourself that you feel like you have the right to enter into a sacred place? I mean, that's just,
Mm-hmm.
that's like me going, yeah, I drank coffee. I could tell Starbucks what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I like coffee. I made a good cup of coffee at home. I now know that I can tell Starbucks what to do. I mean, that's silly and that's simple, but I don't know. That's just sometimes the most basic way for me to go, wow, how did you get so cocky, so confident of yourself that you thought you were worthy to do what was a job that
wasn't yours to do as the priest?
What wasn't yours to do, but was also a significant. I mean, we just talked about this in our Christmas series. I mean, that's what Zechariah was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Offering
lighting
incense,
the incense of altar, and that was a once in a lifetime opportunity for him as a priest. Now, obviously, this is hundreds of years before Zechariah, but it wasn't a small thing. It was a significant thing. It was a thing of honor. It was a thing of
order. I would say too.
Yeah, but it was also a thing of reverence, and to just circumvent that on preference.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the NLT. I mean, I just think it's hilarious. As King Uzziah was holding the incense burner, he was raging at the priests. That is such a beautiful word picture of what a lot of us.
Dichotomy.
Yes.
This idea of I'm holding the thing that is a sacred offering to God, but yet spewing at my neighbors, which is what Jesus all throughout the New Testament was condemning, saying.
Now, it's so much more significant, but to me, I liken it to hearing a great message at church about loving your neighbor and then road raging, trying to get out of church, fighting traffic and flipping someone off.
Mm-hmm.
It's comical. You're like, did you not hear anything? Are you not even aware of where you're at?
Right.
Or is your life in that much chaos that you can't separate your need to be somewhere from how you treat people in the church parking lot?
Mm-hmm. It is. And for Uzziah too, the idea, I mean, if you just, we got into it a little bit but if you really look at the first part of that, 2nd Chronicles chapter, is it 26?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The first part, it says I mean, all these kings, whether throughout Israel and Judah, their history of God's people, one of the first things it says about them is whether they walked with God or not. And right there on the top of it about him, it says he walked with God. This was a person who knew what it meant to, I mean, it wasn't Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus came hundreds and hundreds of years later, but he's a person who followed God, who was following, but yet chose and forgot and walked a different path and chose something different. And how many people on your path, maybe you're listening today, and maybe that's your story. You had this, you took your path into your hands. You made decisions that, so you forgot what it meant to really walk with God and the reverence of what that meant as not just being a way for you to follow, but really the way that you needed to go.
And I think age had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're 16, which, he started ruling when he was 16, he didn't know what he was doing, so he sought counsel.
Right.
But how many of us are guilty of the same thing? When we started out, we understood this. We were honored to do this. I can only liken it to my own life. When I got my first job in ministry, I didn't pretend to know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I was a sponge. I asked everyone anything. Here I am, 18, 19 years later. I don't know that I ask that many people. And I have to constantly remind myself, no, you need to keep asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get yourself here. And this dude was ruling for 52 years.
Mm-hmm.
52 years of repetition, 52 years of hard decisions, 52 years of leading. It didn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the warning for the seasoned saints in our church, is we can go to church for so long that we forget why we go to church.
Wow.
We can follow Jesus for so long that we forgot why we follow him.
Mm-hmm.
We're not why we follow him, but we forgot to pick up our cross.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
we forget that we even have to die to our religiosity that we've spent how many years developing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And
whereas you contrast that to, again, Isaiah, who was the other player. And so I kind of summarize, I like the point you made. I'm trying to find it here. Isaiah confesses before the Lord and is cleansed. Uzziah presumes and is made unclean in the way that he encountered with God. Uzziah presumed he could do what he wanted because God was a part of Uzziah's story instead of the other way around. And really, that's kind of what it comes down to, what you've mentioned. But for Isaiah, I read this quote. It said, for Isaiah, in order to be a channel for God's penetrating word, which is what he was, a prophet who brought the word, like you said, the prophecies of Jesus and what was to come and the hope that was yet to be there. Anyways, in order for him to be this channel of God's penetrating word, the power of that word must have been felt in the person's conscience. So for him to understand the power of what he was doing, he had to feel what that power meant. And certainly this vision that he has, I got to imagine how do you forget that? You know, it's so imprinted on you about who God was that he kept that on the forefront, kept that posturing, that positioning of who I am I'm a messenger of this God that I've seen, who is so big and so mighty and so great that it makes me just confess in front of him and therefore find my place in that of cleansing and my place of calling.
We have a former staff member who, you know, very faithful, loved Jesus, called ministry really late in life, you know, kind of stepped out of vocational or not vocational, but stepped out of the secular world into ministry. But I remember he used to say all the time, he used to call himself a recovering Pharisee. And I think that's so fitting in when you realize, like, when you forget the scandal that you are, the scandal that your life is, that you were still a sinner, that when you're looking at someone else and all of their sin, it is so easy to put on the Pharisee-like vision, the Pharisee-like outfit, where you feel like you can judge them and, oh, they should do this, and oh, I know better, and oh, if only they did this. But in that, you also forget the sinner that you were. You forget the person that Jesus said yes to on the cross that you were.
Yep.
And that's that awareness. And I love, you know, sometimes it's a great way to check yourself. Anne Lamott, again, famous author, discovered Jesus, and I'm not really sure where she's at now, but pray for her. But she would always say, you always tell that you've made God in your own image when he hates all the same things you do.
Right. Yeah.
And that's such a convicting statement.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
I feel like I have to credit her. I don't want to, but it's such convicting. I mean, I cannot tell you, I'm guilty of that being my only response on Facebook comments on social media. And it got to the point where I was just picking a fight. Like I was just being a jerk, but, man, it's just so funny when you're like, man, you hate and you use the Bible or you use your faith or use your conviction as the reason to judge everyone else. That's an indicator you've made God in your own image.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you've become above that judgment. You've become above that questioning or just who are you to say who I am? Like, because I've walked with God for this long.
Well, and to me, again, it goes back to the grace of God, because here's Isaiah who starts his ministry with a vision, and not just any vision, but a vision of God's throne.
Mm-hmm.
And right, he doesn't even see God. He just sees the train of his robe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's angels, and there's singing, and there's shaking the temple, which I can't imagine. I mean, the insanity of that. You know, they have and I should probably look. There's a social media account, it's like an Instagram account, that they put the scriptures in an AI generator, and it generates an image.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool to follow because it probably more accurately than our North American
right minds can
minds can handle. What does an angel look like? But I would just love to see what Isaiah's, that throne room looked like.
Yeah.
But the one part that blew my mind, and again, I would have loved to press into it, is the train of his robe.
Mm-hmm.
In the time of Uzziah and the time of Isaiah, that was what kings did, is they would testify to their greatness. They would testify to their victory. They would testify to their success through the train of their robe. So every time a king would overthrow a country, every time a king would overthrow, a warring faction, the rival leader, their robe would be cut, and their robe the cut piece would be sewn onto the victorious king's robe. So when it says that the train of his robe filled the temple, what it was a declaration was, it was a declaration that you are seeing the victory, the past victory, the Lord of all, the God above every other God. He has defeated every person that has stood in his way. That his train not only fills the temple, but the enemies he's vanquished, the people he has defeated, the lies that he's defeated, the enemy that he's defeated. The train of his robe just filled the temple, and that was enough. Right. And so I think that's what shakes Isaiah to his core. He's not talking to just a God that looks good, a God that is intimidating, a God that's scary. He's looking at a God, and he doesn't see God, he sees God's victory.
Mm-hmm.
He sees that God has defeated everything and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why the angels, the seraphims, are declaring, holy, holy, holy.
But even why the seraphim are covering their eyes, how much of it is you learn in some ways respect based off of how you see other people respecting, somebody. So if these seraphs, which burning ones is a translation, are covering their eyes and they're in the presence of the king, he's seeing that they can't even look at him. And this burning one, the ones that are burning can't even look on the one who is the victor. Should make you go, well, if they can't do it, I can't, look on him either. Woe is me. And which is another testament to the power of proximity. Man, some of the saints of the church who I know, who I see, they're not the ones who are trying to offer the incense. They're the ones going, my lips are dirty. They're the ones who are like, are the ones who are on their faces, in worship, and they're pouring out praise to the Lord, joining in that choir, not trying to have the greatest seat, comparing Uzziah and his posture of wanting to have that place. No, they're the ones who look more like Isaiah in the story, who are, woe is me. My eyes, I can't even look on the king because he's so great.
Well, that's one of my favorite quotes. And I don't even know who said it, but it was someone important, someone cool. It wasn't me. But they said, the greatest saints are not those who use the least amount of grace. The greatest of saints are those who know the value of grace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Isaiah to me. And sitting there going, he stood in that and goes, woe to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. How unworthy am I? Not only am I unworthy, but I have been around what is unworthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is enough to make me not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then just I mean, it's hard to not, I know the whole story, right? I have the whole Bible. You have the whole Bible. It is wild to me to think through, okay, here's this seraphim who takes a coal from the altar, the place of sacrifice, the place of atonement, and it touches his lips. And what's crazy is then David in the Psalm says, this tongue contains life or death.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the tongue. And then you go all the way to Acts 2 when the day of Pentecost happens and the Holy Spirit descends and it rests like tongues of fire or fire on the tongues of men. And it's hard to not compare all that to go, wow, your mouth speaks out of the abundance of your heart. And where he was purified was his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. And to go, man, it's not really what you declare just with your mouth. It's what you declare with your life, but it starts with your mouth. And for him to go, whoa, I'm not good enough. And then to go through that whole refining, to have that purification and to be declared that you have been purified and your sins have been forgiven. And then to hear, which again, if they couldn't see him, could you imagine what it was like to hear him? Who should I send? Whom then shall I send to declare my message?
Mm-hmm.
And to have the confidence, that dichotomy of, woe is me, I'm doomed, take me now, I'm done, to here I am, Lord, send me. What kind of passion, what kind of ablaze? It's the John Wesley quote, if you light yourself on fire and people will come from miles to watch you burn, right? Like we're attracted to those who have passion.
Mm-hmm.
We're attracted to those who without a shadow of a doubt, they believe it and they're declaring it, not just with their mouth, but their entire life. And I that's how I see Isaiah. This dude was on fire himself.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's like, here I am, send me.
Let's go.
Send me.
Yeah, let's go. And I think I like that you came back around to it at the end and kind of be a little bit of a wrap up of this week, as we could do a couple more things here to discuss. But you came back around to saying something along the lines of it was the work of God in Isaiah's life that did that. And we need to recognize that it's not a matter of us just picking ourselves up by our bootstraps. It is a matter of recognizing on this path that it begins with God's revelation, his action towards us, and us receiving that. Because Isaiah could have had this posture of like, oh, I'm too broken for your cleansing. I'm not worthy of that, and never received the burning away that only God could do for him. And we sometimes on our path, we can go, it's just too hard, or I'm just too broken, or I've tried and I can't. And that's exactly where our journey begins, is when we tried and we can't, because it's not ourselves that we do need to then raise our hand like Isaiah after that and say, here I am, send me. There's a willingness, obviously, we have to take in order to journey with God, but it begins, the inception of that journey begins with this recognition that only God can burn away. Only he can set ablaze in us that passion, that fire, in order for us to say yes to him.
And how many people, 100% I agree with you, right? But how many, not a but how many people, like, they believe the lie. They believe the excuse. Well, I'm not passionate. I'm not hungry. I can't do it. Maybe God doesn't love me. And I just want to go, no, it's he who started the good work. Like, if you're yearning for that, then pray for it. Tell God what you want. He is going to meet you at your level of expectation. If you want a Savior that's going to blow your mind, if you want a Lord that's going to lead you above all things, it's going to be bigger and better than you can even than ask for it. I think it's amazing to me that we serve a God who pursues us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Paul's saying. He's like, hey guys, remember, it was he who started this work. And that's what I would tell someone who's feeling disillusioned, that someone who's maybe even feeling disenfranchised in the church. If someone who is not feeling a spark in their faith or not feeling motivated, then pray for that hunger. Pray for that. Ask that.
Yes.
Because your desire for it is the work that God's starting. And the one who starts it will see it through. And just do it. And then I had someone come up to me after church and he said, I was on fire. I was dialed in, and now and then he qualified. I'm not any less. It just doesn't feel the same. And I was like, yeah, be cautious. Because following Jesus isn't always feelings.
Right.
A lot of times it's the right behaviors, trusting that they're going to lead to the right results. And you climb a mountain and you have an awesome view, but you got to go down through the valley to get to the next mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always sunshine and roses.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes it's enduring.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's the valley of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, but again, even the declarations that, yea, though I walk through the valley, you don't stay there.
No.
You keep moving.
But
keep doing the right behaviors.
Discipleship is found in that walking in between those moments. So kind of, just to kind of, as we, last couple of minutes here, we're going to get into the rest of the acronym, awareness of God's presence this week and transformed and helping others. But kind of as we kick off this series, we kick off going deeper today. maybe just a little bit more on, okay, well, how do we walk that? What is that maybe next step for somebody, or how do we take those steps along, either participating in God's story or aware of his presence, kind of unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta, I mean, that's the funny part is they're not check boxes. They're more like buckets, meaning in this season, I'm feeling like this, I'm in this bucket. I need to be reminded. And I don't mean, I got to be careful not to time bound this stuff. And I mean that on both sides. Sometimes we don't sit long enough. Sometimes we sit too long. And that's where the burden is on you. And so while PATH is a great construct, PATH, participate, aware, theology, helping God's family, probably the greater one. And we're going to unpack this in the coming weeks and probably even spend some more time on the next podcast is you have to be able to discern where you're at. You have to do that. Search me, oh God. You have to ask God, okay, what are you telling me right now? And then you have to respond. And I found that the response is often I have to go learn. Oh, I need to share my faith. Well, you have to go learn how to do that. I have to pray more. Well, you have to go learn to have a hunger of God. I have to read my Bible. You have to go learn this new behavior, this new habit. It's a learning thing. And in that learning, then you have to practice it. And that's the part where we're so educated, we're often not obedient. We learn something, but we actually don't put it to use. But that's the key. Once you discern it, you got to go do it. You got to go learn it. Then you got to practice it. Then we breeze past this one. You have to reflect. Is my life better? I have convinced that the journey of faith is a rowboat experience. You don't always know where you're going, but when you row with your back to the direction you're going. And what I'm saying is you see how far you've come. You have to take the time to reflect. Man, I'm not where I want to be, but look how far God has moved me. I'm not to the place that I wish I was, but look how far God has moved me. You have to reflect. Then you have to celebrate. Because when you celebrate, you're tuning your heart, you're tuning your mind, you're tuning your senses, you're tuning your synapses to reward you or to feel that sense of reward. And that is an invitation for God to accelerate. You get a hunger for that celebration. And then again, this is the big one, especially for our seasoned saints. And I don't mean old people. I mean people who've been following Jesus for a long time. You got to do it over, and you have to repeat it.
Right, over again.
Over and over and over again. Because here's the deal. When God is done with you, he'll call you home. So if you have ears to hear, he's not done. If you have breath in your lungs, you're not done. You got to start at square one. Lord, what do I need to be doing? And then you got to go chase it.
Discern, learn, practice, celebrate, reflect, celebrate, and then repeat on and over and over and over again, and what that means for you.
And when I shared with the church, this is then a 3-year process. So that's the 3-year part. I can give people information all day long. No problem. But I'm trying to train our church, to train our leadership, to train our staff, everyone who will listen, everyone has a mouth to speak. What would it look like if we developed an entire army of people who walked around asking each other, hey, what is the Lord teaching you lately? What are you discerning that you need to do? How do we create a hunger for growth, a hunger to illuminate the next step for someone else? And then here's the thing, the accountability that goes along with it. Well, okay, how are you going to go learn that? All right, how are you going to practice it? Where we held each other accountable to that. That is the process that I'm hoping is going to transform our church, is that we create a bunch of people seeking this out in each other and holding each other accountable to what the Lord is telling us.
Man, and I love that really apply. That's a application for everybody really on that one. And I think that hopefully as people are listening and in engaging not just with the series, but beyond, because it's not going away, it's just beginning, is that you have somebody, and even the church, and that's the point of participation and Sunday is have that conversation with somebody. Don't just wait for a pastor to ask you that. Don't just wait for Kyle or myself or somebody, but ask somebody else that, especially those who've been around a long time. What are you learning? What are you discerning? They need to be asked that, but also you have something to learn in that process as well, which community is such a big part of this. So, man, it's going to be a fun series. It's going to be just amazing to see the depth that comes, like you said, from the rear view, looking back at this and going, man, where was God taking Friends Church? Where is he taking the people that he's placed here in this next year? So far, we're going to see what God led us through.
I'm going to say one more thing, because I know there's some people who ask, hey, how are you learning? What are you reading? All that stuff. 2 books that I'm reading right now, I read, that have been just instrumental to this series. They're both great. They're not all encompassing, but they're great to develop hunger. Killer Church by Nathan Finocchio. Why Some Just Survive While Others Thrive in the Presence of God is an incredible book. And then Rich Villodas, he wrote a book called The Narrow Path. And the path to hell is wide and the path to life is narrow. And it's really, again, there's lots of great books. These are just 2 that I would recommend, especially if you're hungry for more in this season. You want to get inside of my head. There's 2 great places to start.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for tuning in on this first episode of season 2. Looking forward to a lot of more amazing things to come as we dig in this series. Hope you join us on Sunday as we continue this series of The Path. Look forward to seeing you then. Thanks. Thanks for joining us today on What We Couldn't Say on Sunday. We hope this podcast helps you dive deeper into God's Word and possibly answer some questions that you may have had from Sunday. Don't forget to check out our website for more information about Friends Church and all that is happening. We hope to see you this weekend.